This is Frank A. Thomas, proud to present to you the history of African American preaching. Last video, I talked about African American preaching BK, before King, the study of African American preaching before King. I now want to talk to you about the study of African American preaching after the death of Martin Luther King, or AK, as Mervyn Warren has coined. It is not happenstance that preaching by African Americans began to receive serious and sustained formal hearing in homiletical hallways only in the early or middle 1970s, as we settled to live with the absence of Martin Luther King. Martin Luther King gave to the majority of white America great exposure into the traditions and the methods of African American preaching. The I Have a Dream speech, particularly the most famous part of it, is at its heart and soul African American preaching. Martin Luther King grew up in a context of folk preaching, went then to school to get a PhD, and took the best of intellectual preaching and the best of folk preaching, joined them together, and moved America, changed America. America was changed listening to the preaching, not only of Martin Luther King, but the preaching of many of the people who were marching and working in the civil rights movement. It was then that the scholarship on the African American sermon became visible. The iconic stature and the respect given the oratory of King in American culture ignited scholarly interest and passion in the study of African American preaching. After listening to King and so many others, mainstream America paid attention to African American preaching and tradition, and even in fields like rhetoric and theology, all of a sudden, African American preaching. Rhetorical scholars analyzed King's speeches and sermons, such as Letter from a Birmingham Jail, I Have a Dream, and I've Been to the Mountaintop. In addition to King and civil rights preachers, scholars began to pay attention to the rhetoric of Malcolm X and others of the black nationalist persuasion. Historical and contemporary figures such as Frederick Douglass, Ida B. Wells, W.E.B. Du Bois, Adam Clayton Powell, Mary McLeod Bethune, Barbara Jordan, and many others. This is the history of the study of African American preaching, and I'm proud to discuss it with you. See you next week. And please don't forget that each and every Monday we do a Periscope live broadcast, 8 a.m. Eastern Time. Twice a week, we release videos in this series on African American preaching. And finally, each and every week, we upload spiritual vitamins to SoundCloud. We want to make sure that you will subscribe to each of these platforms. And I know you want to get as fast as you can this powerful information that's coming forth. So sign up. God bless you. And thank you so much for watching.